Okay, so I'm Kip Petrosky, and I decided to do the Florence Cathedral. So I actually enjoyed doing this project. So I'll be specifically talking about the masonry. I'll bring up a lot more details, but um, some of the biggest parts and the most important part of this dome is how it was built with just masonry brick. So Florence Cathedral. So the man himself is Filippo Brunelleschi. So Filippo was an artist who had never built anything like the dome before, and he was able to construct the largest masonry dome of its kind, and it's still the largest of its kind today. So, born in Florence, Italy in 1377, Brunelleschi entered the Silk Guild as a goldsmith, not a construction, nothing within construction. But later he went into a competition to get his skills recognized as a goldsmith. So forget the bad quality, but this is one of the better pictures could find to get close up. But the art that was used, this is Brunelleschi's art, was an image representing the sacrifice of Isaac. And it was going to be used as decoration on the baptistry, which is another important religious site in Italy. But this was only if he won. And as you can see, it was a very beautiful piece of art. Although during that time, the art seemed to be too realistic or progressive for its time in showing humanism. And due to that, he lost to another guy that was less than this. Once he lost, Brunelleschi disappeared for a while. So now, during this time, the cathedrals pre-Florence used a lot of Italian Gothic architecture. So this Italian Gothic architecture had these massive spires with a lot of repetitive designs. As you can see, it kind of like copied all the way down. And as beautiful and as crazy as it looks, Florence, Italy wanted something different and something that would make them unique. So as beautiful as these are, they didn't like the style that it had. They were trying to beat the others around them. So the plan, ironically enough, the church wanted to make their next cathedral different, right? And so they had planned in advance this grand dome that sat in the cross section of the cross shape of the cathedral. And sadly, the cathedral had been under construction for over 100 years and still did not have a solution to build this grand dome. So the committee began to get tons of proposals flowing in, and all but one seemed to answer what they were looking for. So, as you can guess, our man Brunelleschi actually submitted a plan that would favor in his idea for this construction, and the committee actually liked his idea. So the solution. So Brunelleschi found a way to solve this issue but only told the committee that he could do it. And they agreed out of pure hope that he could do it. So the financial advantage, most large-scale masonry units usually need some type of wood framing before being pulled away so that the masonry can set, so it can dry beforehand. And in order to do this kind of dome, the amount of wood needed would be crazy. This thing was already hundreds of feet up in the air, and the dome itself is like over 300 feet. So in order to support all this masonry, which is hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds, like there was a couple tons of just brick that was coming over this open space, the amount of wood that would be able to hold it. I don't even know if it would work, even if they were to put it up there. So after that, they started to trust him, and that's when he started to, with no prior experience in construction, he began his idea. So this is a start. So Brunelleschi found a way to solve this issue, but only told the committee that he could do it. After the council agreed to have him build the dome, Brunelleschi kept all his plans to himself, all his drawings to himself, and actually burned them afterwards so that no one could steal it from him, and that it gave him the power to do what he needed to do to get stuff done. And then later, all this material had to be moved some way up and down from the ground to on top of the dome. And so the way they did this is typically they'd put a guy in a wheel that had a pulley system. He'd run one way and then run the other. Well, it was a lot of work. So he was able to find a more effective way to move supplies. So by the picture right here actually shows it. So by using oxen and a pulley system that can move in both directions up and down. So there's a gear right next to those oxen that move up and down on the wheel. And thereby eliminating the manpower, not having to stop the oxen every time you had to change directions, which allowed the material to move faster than ever could have before. So typically what they'd have to do if they used oxen, the oxen would run in one way, one direction. They have to stop him, turn around and walk him this way. And that just took too long to stop him every single time. So this gear system allowed it to move up and down and click into these teeth. So when it spun, it would actually, the oxen could just go around in circles and they can move it to the center to reset it to hold the weight, and then they move it up to bring it down. So it just depended on which way it went, which way the oxen were going, and how they moved the gearsman down for it to control it. Pretty cool design. But what leads us, this is what leads us to the fine details. So how did he keep everything even and straight, and how's the brick laid? So typically we were trying to solve this mystery and how Brunelleschi was able to build this stone. It took us forever to figure it out. So one of the keys that we found was off of the 600-year-old document. So it was actually a criticism towards Brunelleschi. It wasn't any kind of, because Brunelleschi burned everything of his. So we had no idea what he wrote down or he writ down. This is the only living document only document we have left that explains anything of his actual construction. So this dome had to be perfectly lined up, like so that it wouldn't fall. So how did he do it? So ironically, now that we have this dome completed, a few people back then were skeptic and thought allowing a man that had no prior experience shouldn't be allowed to build this dome. And this 600-year document was actually a criticism towards Brunelleschi after 5 years after the dome was started construction, and basically ripped him apart. It wasn't explaining what he was doing, it just ripped him apart. But so happened, at the time, this man had no idea what Brunelleschi was doing. He wouldn't share any of his plans. And so luckily, this man actually drew out the lines of how he did it, all the string networks that he used to keep it all together. So there's a small circle at the bottom left next to the black shape of the cathedral. To the left, someone that was trying to solve it actually found there's a small circle that sits around that I forgot what that shape's called. Sorry, octagon. Octagon. Around the octagon, the inner orange one, there's a small circle. And what he found out was that it was in a flower shape. And so they were able to use this flower shape and use lines of string to shape it out. So I'll explain it a little bit more. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So brick and string. So this dome had to be perfectly lined up again. So if it was off even by a centimeter, the thing could critically fail and wouldn't be able to hold itself. So it had to be straight all the way up, or it would not be able to support itself. So that brings us to the question, how? Well, Brunelleschi was able to produce the idea of using the string that was attached to the flower, and that's what the guy found, like pattern that would be moved slowly to make sure every brick was laid and would be in the right spot. Although this, without the right masonry pattern, the dome would have fallen as soon as the brick began to lean forward. In this, he had to prove to the workers that he could be trusted with their lives. And so he actually brought the guys, there's a building that's in the shadow of the dome, the shadow of the cathedral, where it was originally a theater, and it was under construction today, or as a while back, they were digging up a lot of debris and actually found a small version of a dome, a freestanding dome. And Brunelleschi is thought to have proved it to the workers in that spot. He had gone and showed them that this would work and said, this is how it's going to be done. And so they began to trust him. So this pattern is actually called the herringbone. So it creates that V-shaped pattern that eliminates all shear strain with a regular brick pattern that wouldn't have. So by making that shape, when it leans forward, the long way bricks, the straight vertical, actually are long ways, while that one is straight. So each level, it was stacked forward. It allowed for the brick to curve, or it allowed that curve to happen without having too much strain. Because if you had the brick just laid regularly, it'd create this, you stack it like this, and it's stacked all the way, and you'd have this weird point where all this is hanging off, and it would cause it to fall with so much weight. But by doing this, he was able to fix that problem. So this was like the foundation of how he was doing it all. This pattern, so I said it was the herringbone. So that's actually a really picture of what it looked like, just that shape right there. And it wasn't found until later when they were doing studies that they were able to see underneath the dome itself. There's an outside cover. You can actually see on the inside, it's a double dome. So you can see on the inside of how it was constructed, how the brick was constructed. So using this, he was able to make a freestanding dome all the way up to the keystone that made the steeple. So the steeple isn't just there to look pretty; it's actually a key support component. And one of the other cool things about this dome was, I mean, this dome is over 300 feet in the air, right? So the dome itself, when it was being constructed, they go in the circle. And so the string, if you can see that top picture, it was set at the base and then it was up to the top of the dome so they could use it to line up. So they'd shift the string like this across as they're laying the brick to make sure it was laid in the right spot. Well, if you look at the dome during the construction, there was actually a weird downslope of each side, each of those arches or those slopes of the brick, which allowed to have an inverted arch, which is one of the strongest structures in architecture. So yeah, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but it's pretty cool stuff. So, but no true idea of this dome would even work. So even if it was finished, they still were skeptical if it would work once you get to the top, because I mean, this right here picture is probably maybe halfway through or 3/4. Like this thing is just starting to lean. How much do you really think it could hold? So this was all just kind of made up on its spot. So the construction of the dome. So the dome only had 3 recorded deaths in the 16 years that it took to construct it, which is pretty impressive. So finishing in 1436, Brunelleschi was able to see its completion of the dome and having it in the height of, this is the exact height of feet, so 372 feet. That's how high the dome, just the dome itself was. So this dome had been studied and it was a complete mystery to us. And after having the chance to study and look through and our own advancements in masonry, we had figured out how it was done. But again, I mean, a lot of this construction was done in the past, and like the technology then, like that was almost impossible. There was no way that dome could have been built the way it was, but it took one innovative mind to create that idea. So again, the dome was made by a goldsmith. I mean, the master builders of that time would have years upon years ahead of them. And the way he was able to prove to people that he was able to build this dome, within the committee, they had this meeting and they said, so how do you expect to build the dome? He said, well, he brought out an egg. And he said, if you can make this egg stand straight or stand up, then you'll understand how I'll do it. Well, no one could do it. All these other expert masonries, the builders, that no one could do it. Well, he said a phrase that is, he broke the egg on its ASS and he actually cracked it and stood up. He says, if you could have, it's like, well, we could have done that. He said, well, if you could figure out that before, you would have understand my idea. So that's kind of how he put himself in this spot that allowed the committee to be like, you're the guy. But now, today, so it's important today because we keep this history and we learn new things about architecture every day, especially ancient architecture. Some of the mystery of how they did it can help us better understand these types of structures. And like, even we don't understand how back then concrete was somehow stronger than ours and how they were able to put it in the water. Like, we're just figuring these things out. There's so much that we are missing today and that we are losing because we don't stop to consider, we don't stop to look at it. So the people that are dedicated to this kind of research is like, kudos to them, give them props, because this kind of history is really important, and being able to understand how people did this, so that if someday, people forget stuff, if we forget something and they find architecture that can explain how something else is built, that just can help us advance in the future as well. So it's just important. And then this is my annotated bibliography. Sorry for the super long, but I really love talking about this stuff. And it's just, the architecture itself alone was really fun to look at. And I took a lot of the information from bibliography, a lot of from the sources, the Gothic style. And then I found a video that actually helps a lot with the Florence Cathedral, the actual construction of it. I kind of explained it a good through. But yeah, this was a good one. Thank you. Hopefully good grade. I'll talk to you later.